Brooke Osborne, Lynn Norris, Crystal Furman, and Seth Pizzo. All right, and I'll let you guys take over.
Do you guys want to actually go through and introduce yourselves right now? Yeah. So I am Brooke Osborne, and I'm here with Owen Astrakhan as the pseudo MCs of this shindig. I currently work at Code.org, but before I started working there, I was the pilot and outreach coordinator for the CS Principals project. So I worked with our teachers who are doing the formal pilot with the College Board. If you have been around the CS Ed community at the high school level for the past couple of years, you've probably heard of CS Principals, and you've heard of a lot of different implementations of that. So when people say they're teaching CS Principals, that means a lot of different things. These folks are all working as part of the formal pilot with the College Board, which is how the assessment is being developed. So when we say piloter, that's what we really mean. Folks that are helping with the research project to lead to the exam and the assessment eventually. Do you want to get near the recording, so we need to buy a mic.
Just for the purposes of introduction, I'm Owen Astrakhan. I'm the PI in the CS Principals project. Again, the CS Principals project that we're talking about, which is between NSF and the College Board, that has led, after many years, to what will be a new AP exam in 2016-2017. We're just going to tell you a little bit about that, not a lot. This is really a session about teaching the course, and that's why we have teachers here, not a session for us to tell you what the course is about. There are some other ones here for that.
I'm Crystal Furman. I teach at Brookwood High School, which is northeast of Atlanta, Georgia.
I'm Lynn Norris. I teach at Deep Run High School. I teach at Deep Run High School in Glen Allen, Virginia, which is a suburb of Richmond.
Hello, my name is Seth Pizzo, and I teach at Bloomington High School South in Bloomington, Indiana.
I'm sorry in advance that I'm going to block the slides a lot. Okay, so as Owen said, we're not going to talk a ton about high level for the course. We want to really talk about implementation from teachers. But before we do that, we want to make sure, number one, we know what you know. So I have heard of CS Principals, and I think I know what it means. Yay. Okay. I have no
CS Principals, and I still have a question about what it means.
Yay.
I have never heard of CS Principals, but I saw it on the agenda and was like, I'm going to come to this. Okay. I teach a course that I consider CS Principals, or I call CS Principals. Yes, right this moment. No, at all. Like, you have done that last year. You're going to do it next year. Okay, awesome.
Yay.
Thank you. All right, so CS Principals is an up-and-coming, soon-to-be-released College Board AP course. So, oh God, there are too many ways to advance. When I say soon-to-be-released, you might be a little confused because several people raised their hands and said, I'm currently teaching CS Principals. What soon to be released means is that the formal assessment is not finished yet. So piloting is happening. There's a description of what goes into a CS Principals course, what students should learn in a CS Principals course, but the assessment that everyone will take and get a score that might count for college credit, that doesn't exist yet. So that is the high level what it is. It is based on some big ideas that Owen is going to tell you about, and that's sort of what differentiates it from APCSA.
And I want to make it clear when we're talking about the why. So the what is that there are 7 big ideas and there are 6 computational thinking practices, and you cross them together and you get what could be a course, but that course delivery is predicated on trying to reach a much more diverse and larger audience than the current APCSA does. We heard a little bit about that if you were listening to Yasmin Kafai talking earlier. So, building on the work of exploring computer science, which is sitting here for right now, it might move around later. Computer Science Principles is an AP course. That's why it's in parentheses, because AP is a national lever that can reach every school to reach a different type of student, every student, underrepresented minorities, women, That's why CS Principles started coming into existence. So if you want to know more about the course itself, you can go to csprinciples.org and find out all the details. That's the why. The what is, you're going to hear about the what from the teachers who are going to tell you about the what. And Brooke told you about the when. 2016, 2017 is when the course becomes an AP course. That's the first year that you will have an AP exam, and the audit for that process will happen halfway through the year before, so 2016.
Go ahead.
We have currently, as part of this pilot, this is the College Board pilot, 36 high schools and 12 colleges. That will change by a little bit in this upcoming year. That was the past year. You can kind of see where they are spread all over the map. The key here is that it's high schools and colleges. This is an AP course. In order to be an AP course, there has to be credit and placement, or both, or one. So it has to be done in both places.
What week is this from? Do you know? Is this representative?
Yeah, it's
I think
representative.
this is a light week. So, this is the 7 to 10 p.m. block during the week, Monday through Friday. You will notice that it has many things on it. And that's because over this past year, we had a series of hangouts. So one each night of the week, some nights had two, where we helped to provide teacher support for folks who were piloting the course. So people who were teaching this were grouped off in in-person PD, and then following that in-person experience, they talked to one another throughout the year. So you three were all in different groups.
No, Lynn and I were in the same.
You were in the same group? Okay. So we had one call with folks who had taught this course before, and those people who had taught the course before helped us lead calls with teachers who were new to the course. So we were trying to sort of help peer leadership within the group rather than Owen and I just saying, well, here's what we think you should do. We had people who had actually done it before helping to give advice. So this is a snapshot of what that looked like for last academic year.
There are other piloters besides the Computer Science Principles College Board project. This is a map of a snapshot of halfway through last year. The different symbols come from different projects. There's a project Lead the Way pilot. There's a Beauty and Joy of Computing pilot. There's a Compass project in San Diego. There are many different, both NSF sponsored and other projects where people are delivering computer science principles courses, and we're trying to make sure that all those groups are kind of part of a bigger community so that they can also inform what's going on with the development of the course. And these are all the people that have at some point said, I am interested in teaching computer science principles, help me out. And that was as of last year, and we get about 4 or 5 more every week of people that hear about it and say, I would like to know more. And that's one of the things that this process can help inform, is building out computer science principles beyond just our piloters.
All right, so we are going to transition now to actually hearing from the lovely folks right here who have taught this course. So we're going to start with Crystal, and the format here is pretty open-ended, and we would like to leave time at the end for as many questions as possible. But the piloters are going to focus specifically on talking about both the challenges and successes that they felt last year. So you're going to hear them talking about things like performance tasks and learning objectives, and if you don't know what those are, you should not hesitate to ask. But basically, they are part of the framework of how this course works and how the assessment will work. So that's much of the challenge that you're going to hear about, and much of the success you're going to hear about as well. So we're going to start with Crystal.
Okay, so I want to tell you just a little bit about my school before we start, because I think your school really dictates what this looks like. Where you are, what your school is doing, where your students are coming from is really what's shaping this course for me. So in my district, we are northeast of Atlanta. We're a suburb of Atlanta. My school is 3,300 students. We have very high levels of parental support, very affluent area. However, we are a majority minority school, which means we do have a large diverse population. We have a lot of African American and Hispanic and Asian students that are in our school as well. So it really is a good place to start broadening participation. My students, we have 2 feeder middle schools. One of them has a rock star teacher who uses computer science in his classroom, and he is the one that's sending me a lot of my kids. I have to step up my game. I can't teach this course as an intro course. Also in the state of Georgia, this is not an intro course for us. It's actually the second course in a 3-year sequence. So there is an intro course that happens prior to this. Not all students take that, but I have to keep that in mind. So my experience, that was really hard for me to balance, because when you look around and you see what other people are doing, I can't have my classroom look like somebody who their kids have no experience, because mine are coming to me with a wealth of experience and some expectations. So when I started off the year, that was one of the things I wanted to do, was make sure that I rallied the support of my parents. So I had an introductory meeting, and there was a lot of excitement around it. I think my parents really, and my community really like the aspect that this course is showing students a broader view of computer science and not just programming. Where is it going to be applicable, and where is it going to fit into their life? That was huge for my community support. My students, on the other hand, signed up for a course called Beginning Programming. So they expected a programming course. They also expected me to teach the course in Java. And when I started the year, I wanted to switch, and I wanted to teach Alice and Python. And this caused a lot of issues in my classroom at the beginning, because I was not offering them what they really wanted, which was a programming course. That's what they expected. And so what I learned from that is that I just need to be a little bit more flexible and not try to fit in with the mold of other people, and just look at my community and see what works best for them, and then teach to that. So I switched midstream, and actually ended up very positively in the end, won my students back, and we had a very good year. Some of the things that they really liked, my students really enjoyed some of the investigation that was in the data big idea. We did that towards the end. I think data allows the students to really see the applicability of computer science. They liked being able to, we did a project with social media, and they researched their own social media and asked questions that they never would have asked. So in a school of 3,000 students, it's astonishing to me, but they have thousands of friends in their social media circle, and it was interesting for them to look at that and say, wait, I have 1,000 friends, but I only interact with 100 or 150. And it's those kinds of questions that they found very interesting to evaluate their own way of using social media, and it turned out to be an excellent project. We started the project by viewing the My Life in 62 seconds from Facebook, and that was kind of what centered around the project. Was they were creating what their life looked like in 62 seconds on social media. And I think that awareness of how are they using technology was huge for them. So that was a big success for me. Again, my students really enjoyed the programming. They enjoyed Alice. We use Alice in there. They enjoyed the visualization of that. We did some media comp, which they enjoyed, and those were the areas that my kids most enjoyed from this. The Hangouts helped a lot. The ability to have a little community of people that are all doing the same thing, and to be able to come every week or every couple weeks and say, this is what I'm doing, what do you all think, was extremely important for me to validate what I was doing. It's hard to do something new and not know whether or not you're going in the right direction. And so the Hangouts were really helpful to get ideas and share ideas and say, what do you all think of this? And so hopefully, as we grow this, we'll be able to get more, even beyond the pilot, communities of teachers who are willing to share and ask questions and share their experiences, because that was extremely helpful. I don't know if I have any more.
So I'd like to also give a little bit of background on my school, because I actually run a magnet program, the Center for Information Technology. So all of my students come in knowing that that's what they're going to be studying. I do use this as my introductory course. The course that I was teaching prior to this had a lot of similarities. So we're just making some adjustments and shifting some of the rigor and some of the focus. I really like the curriculum framework. I felt it was very successful from the perspective of student engagement. one of the things that is really important, as Crystal mentioned, is knowing your students and what works well for the demographics of not only your classroom but your community, and getting that buy-in. I believe that because you have so much choice in how to implement this, it really allows you to tailor the delivery of this curriculum for maximize student success. I used a variety of unplugged activities as well as computer-based, and I think that was really important for engaging students of all skill levels. Even though students coming into my program had an interest, you know, I had some kids who had been programming for several years and other kids who had never done any programming. So I think that really having that variety and being able to scale things and assignments is really important and helpful the way this framework is built. It was challenging first year figuring out how to get it all in. So I had, you know, I spent part of the summer getting, you know, everything laid out. You know, I'm a type A list maker, and my intention was to complete the performance task in May and June. Well, that was a misconception on my part because the performance task had to be submitted in early May. So being able to stop and regroup was definitely something that was a challenge, and fitting everything in. Keeping that mindset is going to be helpful. In addition, one of the challenges I experienced was the performance task, which we had 3, now there are 2, require collaboration. And so on one Friday, halfway through the programming performance task, a student was there, and on Monday, I got a call from our registrar saying he transferred to another high school in the middle of this collaboration. So that's something that we've brought to the College Board, and they, you know, recognize that that has to be addressed, and, you know, what to do with that. So those things are going to happen. You know, this is high school, you know, or somebody gets sick in the time frame that you have, you know, set out in your classroom for collaboration. So I think being flexible and, you know, understanding that things are going to come up and how do you address them is going to be key. I do really encourage you, if you are interested whatsoever, to look at the curriculum and start experimenting with it. Get your feet wet. Let your kids get their hands dirty on the curriculum, because I think it's very powerful. Overall, I had a final activity for my students where they kind of incorporated all the 7 big ideas in an unplugged activity, and it was really successful, and they were really excited about it. So there's a lot of value to this, and I encourage you to join in some of that community and see what's out there.
Okay, so I have 3 words that I'd like to share with you to help kind of frame my thoughts on teaching computer science principles for the first time. And those 3 words are choice, lessons, and differentiation. So choice is one of the truly great things about computer science principles, because choice is built into the performance task. The students get to choose the topic, and they might possibly, if you're willing to be flexible, even choose the programming language. So it turns out that giving students choices is motivating for students, and they're more engaged when they have some choices. Somebody at our pilot meeting last week asked a question about whether the piloters could make any connections between educational psychology and computer science principles, and choice was really the first word that popped into my mind, and I thought maybe it would be cool to go to Google Scholar and type in educational psychology and choice and motivation, and kind of prove to yourself that giving students choices is really a good thing, and I think a big reason why this class will take off. So lots of other opportunities for student choice in the course if you do projects leading up to the performance task, for example. And project-based learning in general, which really works very well. And interesting to think about project-based learning with the new tests coming out. And I think there's a paradox where students who learn in a project-based environment do just as well, if not better, on the standardized tests at the end than the students who were taught to do well on the test. So that's an aspect of computer science principles that I think works very well in practice. The second idea is lessons and lesson planning. It turns out that there's some great stuff out there. And I wrote a short list of my heroes, and they are The Beauty and Joy of Computing. That's Professor Garcia at Cal Berkeley.
Raise your hand.
Mobile CSP, Trinity College, Professor Morelli. Alabama CSP, Professor Gray at the University of Alabama. There's Project Engage at University of Texas and Compass in San Diego. And those are examples of professors who are working with some high school teachers, and they publish their curriculum online, and it's free. You can go to their website and look at their lesson plans and get ideas and inspiration from there. And that's not all, because there's also the CS10K community. Tons of lesson plans on that website, many of which that I use in my classroom. There are computer science principles lesson plans on the CSTA website. And I'm looking forward to the release of some lesson plans from code.org. So if you're thinking about teaching this class, but a little bit worried about how you're going to do it, I can tell you that there's just tons of great stuff out there. And it's a blessing and a curse, because it does take time to go through all of that and try to think about how it fits into your particular implementation.
Seth, we have a question.
Yes?
Would you just read that list of the universities again one more time?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Beauty and Joy in Computing, that's at Cal Berkeley and also North Carolina State. Mobile CSP is from Trinity College in Connecticut. Alabama Computer Science Principles, University of Alabama, Professor Gray. And Project Engage at the University of Texas.
Thank you.
And then finally, the third word is differentiation, as in differentiated instruction. And I think that on paper, before the class started, when I kind of looked at the students who were enrolled in the class, it seemed like a pretty homogeneous group. But the reality was they were completely all over the place, ability and aptitude-wise. And that's a huge challenge. So you have, I had students on my class who had been programming since they were 10 and gone to Indiana University's computer science summer camp every summer and knew way more about programming than I'll ever know. And on the other end of the spectrum, students who had zero experience and limited aptitude. And trying to make this class work for such a diverse group is difficult. And I kind of went into it with a specific plan. I wanted to do web development. And I love PHP, and I love HTML and CSS and MySQL. I was excited to share my enthusiasm for those things with my students. And it seemed to work for the middle group, the average student. But it didn't appeal to the really high-end kids, and it was too intense for the absolute beginners. So I completely abandoned that and try to get more into getting to know the kids, what they were interested in, and what they were most excited to do. And that seemed to work a lot better than saying, we're all going to do this. The flip side of that is it's really hard to prepare for and plan for, and it's very difficult to assess. So those are my three big ideas, but I'd add a couple more words, and one would be collaboration. collaboration being kind of built into the class. So it isn't optional, it is part of the class. And you have to explain that to the students. It's a little bit uncomfortable for them at first, but once they get into the actually collaborating and working with a partner, it's one of the things they love about the class, and they tell their friends, and then their friends want to sign up for it. So it sounds scary at first, but it turns out to be one of the really fun, really engaging parts of teaching computer science principles. And I think I'll just stop there. Yes?
Did you rotate your collaboration or give them steady partners the whole term?
In my class, we had SETI partners the whole term.
In my class, we rotated partners. I did allow my students to choose their partners. However, I reserved the right of refusal as being in charge if they weren't making a good choice.
In my classroom, I wanted my students to be able to choose their partner for the performance tasks. So throughout our lead-up projects, I had them make sure that they didn't work with the same person more than one time, because I wanted them to know that their best friend may not have been the best choice for when they do the performance task. And so I wanted them to realize that early on. So it was uncomfortable for kids to switch partners, but usually I allowed them to choose their partner, but they just couldn't choose the same person 2 times in a row.
Just in case a few people don't know, the performance task is what's going to be, instead of a free response question, and there are now going to be 2 of them that are done throughout the year. In essence, teachers are going to decide when their students do them, and one of them requires a collaboration. So a collaborative program and writing about that are submitted. So when our teachers talk about, oh, we had to kind of scaffold the instruction so that people would understand who might be an effective collaborator, that's because when the exam is launched, there will be a collaborative part of it that students turn in that will affect their final score. So it makes a big difference, and that's a thing that's not teacher-led when the students are doing it. The scaffolding of the course leads up to that, but once the students are doing the performance task, they are on their own. So that's kind of underneath a current here of the teachers talking about how to structure their courses so that the students will ultimately succeed on that. Brooke had a follow-up for something that Seth was talking about.
Owen and I are going to share a couple of our observations from the year because, we worked with all of the pilot instructors. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little more about something that Seth said, and this ties back to breakfast, and I know Owen had comments about this. We all had breakfast together before the keynote. And while we were there, we were talking about how many times throughout the academic year they had to change course, and they had like a great plan, and like all great plans, it wasn't as great as they thought it would be because they had to change it because things came up. So I think that one of the things that's so great about our community, I mean, look around the other folks in this room, and our pilot community is an example of this, is that we're willing to share ideas with one another and get inspiration from one another. So when Seth realized that, doing PHP and HTML and CSS in his class was not going to engage everyone, he sort of opened it up, and he was telling us about this at breakfast, about how he said, you can do whatever you want. Here are the things that I can support, and here are the things that we're going to learn about together, but if you want to do something totally different, you should do that. And he had the ability to do that, number one, because he's an incredibly brave human being, but also because he had a support structure around him. He could say with confidence that, yes, this is going to take work for all of us, but I have colleagues that know about this stuff that I can lean on. And I think that as a community of educators who are often sort of on our own little islands, we're the only teacher in our school, and in some cases the only teacher in our district, it's really important to leverage the connections you make here, and our piloters leverage the connections they make as part of the piloting process to have a support structure that they can take home with them. Because even the best laid plans are going to require some massaging, and you're going to have to make changes. And I want to encourage all of you to feel comfortable reaching out to one another, and feel comfortable reaching out to the people that you see giving these talks, and join the community of practice that's sort of bubbling up around the CS10K group, because that's how you can sort of reach out and get that help when you need it and want it. And I know Owen had other stuff to say about breakfast too.
I have a couple of questions first. So, Crystal, how many years have you been teaching computer science in high school?
16.
Lynn?
2.
Seth?
1.
So we have a
How many years have you been teaching computer science?
a lot. Well, and I'm not a pilot instructor. Part of this, I wanted to make clear in following up on one of the things that Brooke said, and I think we heard it a couple of times, this flexibility that the teachers here have had. At breakfast, they all talked about, well, if it turned out that this particular way of teaching, and it might have been the language that was used, but it might have been something else. If it wasn't working, I would just stop using it and start using something that was working. That is reasonably atypical.
But all three of us said it.
Yeah.
They did. They all said it. And I said no. As though partway through the 15-week course I taught, all of a sudden my 300 students, I got the idea that maybe Python wasn't the right choice and I should use JavaScript. I would say, well, maybe in a year and a half I'll switch the course. Not like right out from under them. But I think that's something to understand, that this is a pilot. That's the other thing. This is a pilot. So ultimately, if everybody has to switch every year many, many times, that might be a problem. But it's an opportunity here for these teachers, and I think, Brooke talked about them being brave and willing to do this. I think that's key. Realizing that if we're going to have 10,000 teachers, not every one of those teachers is going to have that braveness. Is that a word? Bravery.
Courage. There you go.
Yeah, courage. So there are going to be some people that want, this is what I'm doing from the beginning to the end, and then because you also have to be comfortable with your own lack of comfort, which is something that would be good to have. You can't get that except from experience over time. One thing that we're going to say a couple of things about kind of what we've learned from working with all these teachers, and these are 3 of the 50 that we had. Just a couple of things that we've seen, and then open it up for your questions. So we'll make sure that we have time for that.
Before you go, can I just say something about switching midstream? You don't have to switch midstream to be flexible in this course. That's what the performance tasks are providing for you. As long as you're able to teach your course, you're teaching for the create, and you're teaching Alice. You can teach that to all your students, but then when it comes time for them to do the create, that's when you really can be flexible, because that's when you're not supposed to be helping them anyway. So if they really know something else and they want to do their project in that's where I would say somebody who's not comfortable flexing midstream, because that's really scary, you could flex there very easily and say, sure, you can do that. Is it able to do, I had students bring me things, I can't even remember what they were called because I didn't pay close enough attention. I just asked them, is it able to do conditionals and loops and list structures? And they said yes, and I said, okay, go to it. Don't ask me because I don't know, but if you're comfortable with it, go to it. So that's an area where you can be really flexible.
And that's something that we did see across all the offerings, was a change in I think the pilot instructors from when we first met almost exactly a year ago with this first group, and learning about what we were going to do, and then a slow ramp up of, whoa, what am I doing, and then all of a sudden the ability to have this kind of flex was impressive.
And I think so. Something that's important, several slides ago, which I can do now, thank you, Dan. This is the phase 2 of the pilot. So even though this is our first year working with these folks, this is actually our 4th year of piloting the curriculum framework. And something that was really remarkable to me that ties back to this flexibility is that when I would work with pilot instructors and I would see their classroom implementation, they would have, this is the plan, this is what I'm teaching, these are the tools I'm using, the language I'm using, so on and so forth. And there was never that outlet or opportunity to just let students have control. And this is the first year that at a wide scale we've implemented performance tasks, and something that we're sort of seeing across the board in this is what Owen just mentioned, is that folks are taking a step back and saying, this is what we did together, but if you want to do something else for your personal thing, that's what you should do. So it gives that structured space as a sort of an artifact of how the course is built and how the curriculum framework is built. It gives students the agency to make their own decision, because as the teacher, you're not responsible for what language they choose. You're just responsible for them to go off and do it, and giving them time and space to do it.
That lesson of having the students choose things is not something that you can only use in CS principles. So we're not trying to say that that's trademark CS principles. Students decide what interests them.
Student choice is illegal everywhere.
But the course was built on that. So the course was built with that in mind, and that's a difference, because it's easier to convince teachers to do that when it's kind of part of the process and it's open-ended from the beginning, than when you want to have to come in and do that kind of after the fact. It certainly changed how I do my more regimented courses by allowing this student choice and flexibility, so that's a great thing. Do you have more meta comments?
On this particular topic?
No, anything.
Like from here? Sure. I wanted to make one comment, and then probably more than one because they will come to me. But one comment about, I guess, just sort of a trend or an observation from, doing 6 hangouts a week, every week for a year, and seeing these people all the time, even though, we were all across the country. It was really remarkable to see not just the connections that were made, but like how invested people were in other teachers' students. And I know that's a lot of connections to make there. But so, I would be on a call where 3 months ago, Crystal mentioned a student who was really struggling with something, and someone else on the call would say, oh, well, how did your student end up doing with that? And, recall the situation and be connected and invested in knowing how it went, which is, to me, more of a sign of what I see in my friendships than in most of my sort of work relationships, because, we have our pleasantries and then we go about our business. These people really have sort of formed, I would say, a closer community and a closer bond with one another, even though they're teaching totally different things within the curriculum framework, though. But they're staying in touch and they're staying active in one another's teaching lives. And I think that this sort of opened my eyes to the fact that community is what you make it, and what we had this year with our pilot instructors is a group of people who wanted to see each other succeed and wanted to know when each other had struggles so they could support one another. And that was something that I have not ever seen in a group as dispersed as this group, because, other than the East Coast, where apparently everyone lives, there's a pretty wide range here. So that was powerful to me, and maybe all of you have experienced that, but I, worked down the hall from people for 5 years and was not nearly as close to them as these folks were, and they just met and worked together for a year, but they were vulnerable and open with one another in their teaching practice, and it was really impressive.
I want to give the teachers up here a chance if they have something else they wanted to mention. I know that Seth had 3 words, but maybe another one occurred.
5.
He mentioned all 5.
Oh.
Okay. Do any of you guys have something else before we?
I do. I want to clarify, because I know some of you have heard that we did have 3 performance tasks, and now we have 2. And if any of you sat in on Dan Garcia's workshop yesterday, he did a great job of talking about the fact that even though the data performance task is not going to be an official task that will be assessed by the College Board, it is still a wonderful and valuable way to assess student learning and to get students engaged in the big data, big idea. And I really, for me, it was a very successful performance task from my student standpoint. And I plan on, even though they won't be doing an official submission, to maybe massaging that a little bit to provide some different scaffolding and continuing to use that for my student assessment for their success. And I think I want to make sure that people don't think, oh, it's going away. They're still going to be responsible for it on the actual, whatever the other computer-based test is going to look like. And it's a really key factor. And I think it did a really great job of integrating a lot of things, a lot of the big ideas.
Definitely, I would agree. It really is one of the things that shows students the applicability of what we do, and that's one of the things that I think CS Principals does really well, is show students applicability for computer science. So,
The data unit. Dan Garcia said yesterday that eliminating the data performance task, well, maybe this isn't such a bad thing, because one, students had problems finding the raw data online, and two, they struggled to ask the right questions. So now we can do something like the data performance task, only now we're allowed to coach and scaffold the students in doing these things that they struggled with trying to do last year. So I think that's a message for all of us who believe that computer science doesn't equal programming, and are excited about data science and sharing that aspect of the course with our students.
So the learning objectives around the data unit task are still there. And one of the things, echoing what Seth is saying, that we've heard throughout the year is, can our students use data that they have curated and generated themselves through surveys of students in their class or the entire school? And the answer had been, yeah, probably not. But now the answer is going to be, of course you can, because it's not part of their performance task. So the students can use data that is purposefully meaningful to them because maybe they helped generate it. We have some time for questions. We'll go this gentleman and then that back there and then over here.
If we're going to get to 10,000 or beyond, it seems like all this has to be very scalable. And my concern is, I've been in Jeff Gray's Alabama program, not in his small group, but on his big group. A big part of that has been the hangouts. They've been great. And I've gotten to know people that I care about, and it's helped me understand what I need to do. But when his course is over, for the most part, that's going to go away. And as it scaffolds, as the whole thing begins to grow and grow and grow, there's going to be people who won't have hangouts. Where do you have an idea about, as the group goes beyond you all, is that a role for local CST chapters to have, to start running statewide hangout groups? Or when you envisioned this, when it got bigger than you, what did you envision?
So let me, in case you didn't hear the whole question, I'll try to condense it, which was, scaling this is going to be tricky. And scaling this kind of community hangout approach where people get to meet each other, even in a virtual place, on a regular basis, is going to be really hard, because if you're going to get to 10,000 teachers, there are not that many people up here that are going to kind of facilitate these hangouts.
It was really hard with 50 teachers. You could see our schedule.
And let's also I would like to make one thing clear. The hangouts were completely not required. The high school teachers and the college teachers in our pilot did not have to participate in the hangout. It was something that was totally voluntary, and we made that clear over and over again, and yet it would still have very high attendance. So you asked that question, isn't that going to be difficult? And I'd say yes. And then you also said, is that a place where local CSTA chapters can step in and perhaps fill a void? And I think that would be a great plan. Okay. And then you also asked my vision for how to make this go forward and scaling it. And I think, yeah, local CSTA chapters, that would be a great idea. Because we're even going to scale back our hangouts, because we have a first year in, and we can't continue to do this literally 5 days a week. Brooke and I were on calls every night. And that's not something that you can maintain forever. Yeah.
Another thing that I think is important is that part of how scaling works is that you have to give up control. So, I'm sorry, it's going to have to happen. But the reason I say that is because it's not just about empowering people to want to talk to one another. It's also about empowering people to take over this movement. And the teachers are the ones in the classrooms, and they're the ones that know what's up. And when we would be on calls, it would really be to hear what was going on so we could take that back and try and support them better in other ways. So the people who were really doing all the work on those calls were teachers. And I think that this model, part of what could make it scale, is more or less just having some central group, and maybe this is how you don't relinquish control, have some central group that says, hey, if you want to have a hangout, sign up for a group here, and this is going to be the topic on this night. And it's sort of an autonomous thing that runs itself. But at the end of the day, the people who can help one another are the teachers. So I think a model that would scale, and this is part of what I imagine this community will look like in 10 years, is a self-sustaining system that gives teachers space to talk to one another. Because it turns out, if you look at what the breaks look like, you all go up and introduce yourself to strangers and talk to one another. You're outgoing people who basically talk in front of other people for a living. You know how to talk to strangers. So I think if we provide the space and the opportunity for teachers to connect, they're going to take advantage of that. And it needs to be structured for some people, or really for everyone. But if we're trying to get to 10,000 teachers and beyond, I think at some point it just needs to be about the teachers leading the teachers. And that's where CSTA could come in.
Absolutely.
We have a question there.
My question is kind of, so I'm trying to be precise, but I heard Seth mention that assessment is difficult, and I see that as somewhat of an issue. So the first part of my question is, are in the curriculums that are available and in any way, are we able to find rubrics that are taking some of these projects, lead up projects, or are there, what are people using for assessment? Are people using paper and homework choice tests as well to get within that regard? And then my kind of follow-up to that is, as a experienced math teacher, generally when we teach a new course, we look for a textbook and it will have ideas for assessments and ideas for, which you may pull from 5 or 6, and then you could, and I was shocked to find even here in the exhibits there were 0 textbooks. So is something being designed that could assist that process somewhere either online or
Just repeating the question really quickly, there are two prongs. One, assessment. How do you do it, and are there rubrics available, and are there things to help? And then kind of continuing on that, textbooks. Again, because of both the assessment aspect of it and because that provides some structure and support for people that are coming into this new. Is that?
yeah, and my class will have to be associated with a community college course, so I'll have to tell them what textbook I'm using, and it'll have to be approved, that kind of a thing. Just wondering if any of that's.
So the first question about whether there is a textbook for this course, the answer is no. Will there be a textbook? My guess is the answer will be yes. Whether that will be a good textbook, that's a very different question. As far as both formative and summative assessments,
No, pause before you
Okay.
leave the book thing. I think we should talk to these 3 teachers here and ask you what books you used in your class. I have
Sure.
a feeling what you're going to say, and if you don't say it, I will say it, so go.
What textbook?
Yeah. Okay.
I don't use a textbook.
No textbook.
Okay, so that's what everyone says. And that's what I was going to say if they didn't say it. And I don't know what you would have said if not that. But there are lots of resources that people shared with one another. So part of what makes it hard for there to be a textbook is that this is kind of focused on what's happening in the world around you. And unless it's like a living textbook that can update itself every day, that makes it kind of hard to do that. But there are materials that lots of people used, and I would imagine if you go to the community of practice, cs10kcommunity.org, there are lists that people have generated because they were sharing these resources back and forth. So if you're in a position where you have to say, you have to have a book because your school requires having a book, there exist books that people have used. Blown to Bits is probably the book that people use the most. And I know at least 2 pilot instructors who were required to list a textbook, and that's what they listed, which is also nice because it's free, if you did not know that. It's free on the internet. Talk about systems.
there will be teaching guides available for this course being produced by the College Board and our pilot teachers, both college and high school, and those will be available very beginning of fall, and there will be pointers to them from csprinciples.org. If you can't find them, you can always get to all the material that way. So I think there's a recognized need that there needs to be more of this, and we're going to try to provide that. There was a question here first, and then I'll come over that way. Go, yes. The question is AP Summer Institutes, are there going to be those for computer science principals like there are for other ones? And the answer is yes.
And something that's actually something that is kind of cool is that the College Board is thinking about changing how they do the institutes, how they recommend structuring them for CS principals because the course is so different. And you might see those changes leak into other things that end up having performance tasks. But there will be, part of that is the course description and the audit process and things like that will come as we get closer to the assessment. But yes, and it might even be better than what you're used to.
But so you will find this information when it's available. There's nothing right now, but whatever there is available, it's stuff is being planned now as we speak.
Yes, on the computer science books, I looked around about a year ago online and found a variety of books with titles like Computer Science Principles and Intro to Computer Science, mostly for community colleges and colleges. And I picked up used about a half dozen of those from a title that sounded right. And I've used them for the last year in my International Baccalaureate Computer Science course. And those of you that teach that course know that it's changing too. And I found the book very informative and interesting, and even an update for myself on a lot of ideas from a variety of areas that I hadn't done much work in the last 5 or 10 years. And so I would just suggest that you go online and search out the books that are called Computer Science Principles out there, related names, and buy a half dozen used ones if you want to try some out for $10 or $15 and see if those work out. And I think that's where we're going. When the publishing industry does start to present us books, they're going to look like that, like those books that I found.
Michael, are you a radio announcer when you're not teaching? Because you need to be.
People have suggested it.
Yes. Well, there's a reason.
We have a question over here. Yes. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, those of you who use blown to bits, how you use it. Because I am familiar with that book, but I'm stymied about how you actually use it in the classroom.
The question is for the people on the panel and that have used blown to bits, how do you use it in the class? Because it's other than just something to read, I think is what you're asking.
I used excerpts from it. I didn't have them read the entire book, but we did read parts of it, and they had to. We did some note-taking techniques with it, where they had to, highlight and comment, and then my students had to keep an electronic portfolio. So a lot of times they reflected on the passages that were assigned through their blog posts in their electronic portfolio. I did it in Google Sites. They set it up in there, and that's one of the changes I'm going to make. I did that a little late in the beginning of the first semester, and I'll do that like first thing is what we'll do is set up our Google site. And it was really an excellent way for them to embed their infographics and their videos and their programs and things like that, so that when they were done, they had this body of work that they had worked on, along with thoughts and comments in their blog.
Seth or Lynn, do you want to say anything about blown to bits?
I did not use blown to bits. I do plan on using parts of it this coming year, much the same way of doing some excerpts from reading and then having some discussions and some reflection on it.
We use blown to bits, not the entire book, but we use that as background information about how the internet works, and also on the topic of security. So it's free, it's online, you can download separate chapters, it's a great book. Short reading quizzes work to make sure the kids read the material. So a great resource.
This is something that I think that would be good to have on the CS10K community, the community of practice, is essentially a place for resources for people using Blown to Bits, so that we can share those. So we'll work to make sure that happens. We had a question here, and then I'll go back there.
I just want to make a comment about the resources before we do that. One of the things that I did a lot in my classroom was look at current technology articles and had my students read those current technology articles. They're not really all that long. A lot of times, one of the ones that we did was on Google contact lenses, and we took the big ideas and we applied each one to that article. So they wrote an algorithm. They implemented that algorithm in Alice in a very rudimentary way. We talked about abstraction in there. We talked about what kind of data could be collected with that technology to help somebody with diabetes. And so, you know, looking at current technology, I mean, I think we need to, a textbook's going to be outdated pretty quickly. And so looking at current articles and trying to apply the big ideas to that has been very helpful, I think, in my classroom.
Question.
I wanted to share something about Blown Bits, but then I also had a question. So this year I had students in pairs pick a different section of Blown Bits, and they had to develop discussion questions to lead the class in a discussion about that topic, and it worked really, really well. And I know a lot of humanities teachers do things like this, but I had never done it in my class. So it's something that I'd recommend trying. My question was, so I imagine for the performance tasks, since you can't help, them choosing a manageable project is really important. So I want to know how you prepared them in choosing a manageable project.
Part of the performance tasks originally had them choose an area of focus, and we struggled with that, and it's no longer part of the performance task. However, I think through that struggle, with them actually paring down and actually selecting a focus area, really helped the students to pinpoint what they wanted to do. I think also spending time making them, you know, plan it out so that they have this great idea in their head, but then when you go to do the algorithm of that, perhaps in the time frame that you have, that's not logistically feasible, you know, so making them go through those planning steps.
I think for me that really the scaffolding takes place in everything you do up to the performance task. I know myself and a lot of other piloters had students do something similar to a performance task that was very scaffold and, you know, step by step and in discussion as well as then practice doing some of those things. And I think that really helps them understand the scope. Having those discussions when you're doing those scaffolding activities about scope and time frame and planning and, you know, what happens when things don't work is really key to building your students' ability to be successful on the performance task.
I don't have an answer to the question. I'm hoping the answer is that at some point we get exemplars. We all need, all the teachers, we all need exemplars. The students need exemplars. I don't know how many hundred performance tasks that you guys collected last year, but could you share a few of the really good ones with us?
IRB. Question?
Mine is more of a general as far as curriculum. You know, how many students would take this class and AP Computer Science? Do you have an overlap? Is that instead of, you said people teach us as an introductory class, we have AP Computer Science class, we have an introductory programming before people invest an entire year in AP Computer Science. So where does this fit curriculum-wise? Do you have overlap between taking this and AP Computer Science?
The question is, where does this fit into the kind of pantheon of computer science courses in high school? Do students take this and AP and this, an introductory course? And we have a minute.
Okay, so the answer is yes. I have about 60% of my students that take CS Principles move on to AP Computer Science A. My hope is that the students that I am drawing into AP Computer Science A from gifted, I have a whole group of kids in AP Computer Science A who only take that class because it has AP in front of it. My hope is that those kids will get hooked in there, and that this will also be a course that they can cycle back to too, so that they can broaden their viewpoint on computer science. No, absolutely not. And in our state, actually, I told you there's 3 courses. There's an intro course, and it's supposed to be CS Principles and then AP Computer Science A. So they're meant to take them both.
Mine is a sequence, and we start with the principles class.
My school doesn't have a PCSA, but I don't see it as a sequence, and I don't see a lot of overlap. I would think they would complement one another, and
Yes.
one class would appeal to some students, one class would appeal to the others, and both might appeal to some students in any order.
Yes.
There are other sessions about computer science principles, and our pilot instructors will be here and available for questioning and autographs all day. But I think I'd like to make sure that we all give them a big hand. So thank you.